First story. The struggle reel. My 51M wife, 48F, basically had an affair with a co-worker starting last fall. I became suspicious when she had left her phone in the car a couple months ago and called me in a panic from her iPad saying she wanted me to bring it home to her. I was already running late and I would be back in a couple hours. I said I would bring it to her then. She was saying some cockamamie BS about emergencies and the kids, 2 at home, 16 and 20. 22 years old, away from home. I pointed out that she was literally talking to me on her iPad and assured her everything would be fine. Thought nothing of it. Until I am on my way home and a text comes from the building guy, maintenance janitor, etc. She manages the building, so they worked very closely together and it wasn't uncommon, so I thought, for them to have to communicate a lot. Sometimes if it was after hours like this time, it could be important. So of course, that's where this nightmare began for me. I wish I had the foresight to forward the whole thread to myself then, but I was such a hopeless chump. I trusted her, and the messages were definitely not anything damning. The few that I saw, just very flirty. And it was clear that they were in constant contact about everything, not just work. The one text I read that first time mentioned something about her working in the yard, which was funny BCZ, she almost never does that, and him expecting to see no tan lines, So definitely no smoking gun stuff, but it absolutely got my attention. So of course my dumb ass starts asking her questions. Huge mistake. I had never been lied to or gaslighted, and I still thought she was my person and that I was still her person. So I let myself sort of believe her. But that feeling in the gut, that you sadly learn the hard lesson of trusting eventually, was telling me there was a lot more to the story. So suddenly I become Magnum PI. I was still so new at ever having to think about any of this stuff. I still had access to all her devices and there was no suspicion. So I started to read through the texts when I got the chance. I would scroll back further and further. Still no blatant fire, but definitely some smoke. Lunch together every day, sometimes apparently involving going for a drive. Lots of just really sweet things from her to him and some suggestive memes and comments back. Enough to make me think they could definitely be more than work friends. Enough to really start fucking with my head, and of course I'm still too chumpy at this point, so I try talking to her more. I guess I must have been hitting some nerves. BCZ, she started really opening up the floodgates at this point about not loving me anymore, not being attracted to me for a long time, resentment for a spell of drinking and letting myself go for a couple years after COVID. I had quit drinking at the end of last summer and have been getting into the best shape of my life. But this didn't matter to her. She basically said she had realized that she could fall for someone besides me, and didn't want to spend her whole life having only loved one man. That hurt like hell, of course. She was insisting that nothing had happened between them besides being friends and venting to each other about, among other things, their miserable marriages. I honestly had no idea she had got to that point. We have been together for 34 years. Met on the school bus. We have had an incredible life together. So many joys and highlights, amazing kids, nice place to live. I think I have always been happy to let her manage the finances while I ran my insurance agency, which she used to help with for a couple years when we first opened. She has also always been able to buy whatever she wants. That got a little crazy, and I realized later that she used buying J.Crew clothes as a comfort mechanism. She probably has close to $50,000 stacked in all our closets and piled to the ceiling in our, well, soon to be my, bedroom. Turns out she had also opened a bunch of credit cards I didn't know about, but that's another story. So I know something must be going on. I'm sure of it. But instead of just coming clean, she let me go through a month of thinking I was going crazy. She saw me at my absolute worst during that time. As I was uncovering more and more info, and feeling more and more conflicted, I had very few people I confided in besides her, so of course on top of seeing me cycle through the stages of grief, she had to endure me begging and pleading for answers and sympathy and compassion, which she quickly ran short on. Eventually she said she was moving out and the marriage was over, after an extremely traumatic fight. I had threatened to call her affair partner, and for the first time in our 34 years together, she physically attacked me. She went apeshit FCKNG crazy, started swinging haymakers and trying to kick me with all her might. Luckily I'm a pretty burly dude and she wasn't able to land much, but she did draw blood. So at that point, I realized that she was willing to literally put me in the hospital to keep me from making trouble for Ron. That right there should have been the moment for me. Inside I knew that was the end for us, but I was still a chump. I still loved her and wanted desperately for her to realize that the thrill of sneaking around with this douchebag would not equate into some greener grass happily ever after, and tried to get her to not throw away our life together. Our last kid is a high school senior in the fall. Once she's done, we would finally have the chance to make all those dreams we had built together come true. Lying in bed planning about the grandkids and Sunday dinners we would have. Little babies running around us again and just finally achieving these things. And here we are, right there on the goal line about to punch it in for the win. And on the last play of the game, instead of winning, everyone gets to lose instead. So it's been impossible to handle this with much grace on my part. I'm not proud of a lot of what has happened over the last few months, but I'm realizing there wasn't much else I could have possibly done. On top of this, after her declaration of the end, she said she was leaving. But nearly 2 months later and she's still here, still keeping secrets, basically telling me tough shit, she's going to do this, even though there's no way she can afford it, which scares me. She says she has a place lined up to move to in the next couple weeks. Not sure if it will happen, but it's been a daily heartbreak. I can't live like this much longer. It's amazing to me that she is okay staying here and making me go through this every day. I'm conflicted as hell. Part of me knows I need her gone, but part of me wants to take her upstairs and make love to her. It's so pathetic. So there's my story. There's more, but this is more than enough for now. TGX for reading. I did get evidence that she was doing shit with this guy and continues to be sneaky with him, telling his wife as soon as divorce is final. More info. Thanks for all the responded, it means a lot. There are a couple things I wanted to add, mostly because my phone was about to die earlier. LOL, as a lot of people here know, you can't just flip a switch after 34 years of loving someone. It's taking me a minute. It felt like all the tears in the beginning were literally the love escaping from my heart, and it was really chock full. Still is pretty full, and the truth is that I will always love her. She gave me 3 great kids, she did a pretty good job of raising them with me, and 95% of our journey together as partners, lovers and parents were incredible. We will end up being really pissed off at each other before this is all said and done, and maybe I won't ever be able to forgive her, but chances are that I probably will eventually find a way to find some affection for her again someday. We will have grandkids running around. We will see each other all the time with the 3 kids. She genuinely feels bad about how things went, and while her empathy tank is pretty empty for me right now, she feels bad about how this is affecting me. And I know this is crazy and sounds ridiculous, but part of me respects her resolve. Yes, she checked out of the marriage already. But after all this time, being hopelessly codependent mostly the whole time, we really do know each other really well. Just because I finally got a sniff of the thing, and that initiated the process of me proving it to myself. An exercise in self-mutilation, if you think about it. Looking back and being honest with myself, it had been since around last summer since she had been acting normal. Until then, things were okay. I happen to know for sure about the timeline of how things developed with a coworker. And the truth of it is that once they started flirting and then it started becoming an EA, he was hesitant because he is married. But she was so enamored by the thrill she got from this new thing that she wasn't going to let it go because the excitement of the attention she was getting made it irresistible to her. Warning. Some people are going to be convinced that what I am about to say is somehow making excuses for the shitty thing she did. That is not at all what this is about. I am typing this part out because I think it might ring true for some others here. Without getting too specific, I will say that she has some serious issues from when she was little with some horrific shit that happened to her family. A couple really bad things. In fact, she has needed some therapy for this for a long time. But she basically self-medicates through shopping and smoking weed constantly. Literally smokes a joint in her car every day at lunchtime. Wearing her full professional attire. Then goes back to running the facility 30 minutes later. Some of her childhood shit I won't even talk about, except to say that it involved a step monster and her siblings. She was not targeted by him, but it still really messed her up. Then there was her real dad, who walked out on her and her three sibs when they were really little. He was like a superhero to them, and he really did a lot of damage by never keeping promises, not showing up when he said he would, basically ignoring them for the most part. Later in life they all reconnected, and he was a great guy who I was glad to know, but back in the day he was a shat, and he would be the first to admit it. So a big part of her issue is that she has a very deep need for attention of any kind, especially from older men. For a long time, the attention she got from me, and later from the kids, was enough. But then by the time she went back to work after being able to stay at home with the kids for a long time, the two of us had gone through the natural cycle of parents being forced to no longer be connected at the hip like we had for 20 years. And suddenly there were other men in her daily life who found her attractive, and she really loved it. Not that she broke her marriage vows immediately, she didn't. But it opened this new door of validation for her, which she really liked. Eventually that external validation from men became something she craved, and just the other day when we were talking, after I found out that she had been flirting with an old man, literally almost 70, who was a patient there at the medical facility where she is the building manager. He's very sick and has to wear a catheter. He couldn't retire and needed a job, so they let him work there. This is a man who is not someone who she would ever actually want to fuck, but the fact that he was interested in her was all it took for her to want to flirt with him. She said it was because she wanted to brighten his day, but the truth is that she is that desperate for external validation. She said to me that she didn't think she would ever want to be married again, because she just loves to flirt so much. Even with a 70-year-old cancer patient. Shit, if you saw my wife. And if I put 10 guys in a lineup, and had you pick the one you thought was the guy she had the affair with, I guarantee the coworker she had the affair with would not get even 1 out of 1,000 votes. I mean, you hear the term cheating down a lot, but this is on a whole other level. You genuinely would not believe me. I think it's because she knew that someone like this ugly little dude has never had someone like her return any interest in him. So she had this guy really thinking he had won the lottery when she started returning his affection. He was a guaranteed bullseye hit. So she has become genuinely addicted to the attention she gets from men when she flirts. So much that she is willing to blow up her own world completely so she can keep pursuing that external attention. Regarding the physical attack, while I do appreciate your comments and understand the danger there, I'm not going to report anything to the cops about it. I learned my lesson that night and I got all the info I needed from her actions there. In response to all the recommendations about voice recorders and evidence gathering, trust me, I did all that shit, and I got all the info I need. On that subject, I will report that I think after a certain point, once you know enough to support your decision, it's very self-sabotaging and can do a lot more damage than good. I heard a lot more than I needed to hear on a voice recording. Way more than I needed to know. I already knew it, but I think I needed to find just a little more pain to tip the scale in my mind. As far as the other spouse, I do feel conflicted about waiting, but if she goes Nuke and my wife, soon to be ex, that's still so weird to say, gets fired from her job too soon, it could really cause unwanted consequences to me. This loser kind of worked in a subordinate position to her, and I can see the hospital taking action because of it. So yes, I feel bad for not telling her right away, but I really need to be careful. Thanks again for the responses. It's really great to feel a little less alone for a few minutes. Here's an update. This is embarrassing just like most of this shit, but I realized that while I was trusting her to take care of the bills, part of that entailed writing a check to be drawn from my business bank account each month to help with bills. Turns out that a large part of that money was getting sent to pay her credit card bills, some of which I had no idea she had taken out and run out some big balances. So I took her name off the account and had the bank cancel her access and her debit card, etc. Opened my own separate account that I will be having my paychecks and supplemental payments going into moving forward. I told her to stop the automatic payments on the cards and she agreed to pay them herself. The only way I can control this is by not putting money into our still existing joint account, but I am starting to get all the bills, or at least the ones I am going to pay, switched over to come out of my separate account. I was noticing the balance on my business account was steadily decreasing. And although things have changed with my income from my business, less commissions being paid than before, and I knew that would impact my balance, I was still not understanding how it has been getting so low. Now I know. I don't think it will take me long to get that shored back up, since I have been living a pretty simple lifestyle myself over these last 10 years or so. But it adds to the betrayal. In her mind she was justified in doing it, and insists that I was told about these cards. I swear I had no idea about a couple of them. So the prospect of having her gone gets less and less painful. Even if she told me tomorrow that she changed her mind and wanted to work things out, it's way too late for that. She fucked around. Now we enter the find out stage. I know it's chumpy, but I honestly feel bad for her, knowing the corner she has painted herself in. The truth of it is that I am not going to help her much with any of it. I will end up paying more than my fair share once the dust settles, and that's going to be it. She will probably end up having to find a second job or something. WHCH, I'm sure she won't mind. More potential dudes to flirt with and homes to wreck. I'm ready to let her become someone else's problem for a while. I did my time. Thanks again for all he kind words and great advice. The place is really a great resource for people going through this. Unfortunately, if you know, you know. Update. Since my last posting and update, a lot has happened with me on this thing. Most notably, I finally had enough of carrying around the weight of my cheater's secret, and called the other spouse this morning to ask her if she knew what was going on. She said she had suspected something but really had no idea. So I explained what I knew and she was of course flabbergasted. She told me that she was shocked to hear about this, but that he has a history of doing this same thing. Turns out my son's friend who also works there at that same place had an aunt who had dated this guy a long time ago, and he did the same thing to her. That was just a coincidence that I found that out today as well. Didn't have a chance to tell the other spouse that, but if we have any follow-up convo, I definitely will. So she freaked out. Ended up calling my ass TBXW at her work and screamed at her. Made her really scared that she was going to do something. I later called her again just to ask her to please promise me she wouldn't do any physical harm, and she of course said she would never do that. But my cheater was livid. Some of the crazy shit that comes out of their mouths when they are upset and defending their affair partners is downright disturbing. So she proclaimed that I was dead to her. Already knew that there was no longer any chance for us to be friends ever again. Already kinda knew that, and she finally moved out today. She had happened to finally rent a storage unit for her $50,000 plus an expensive clothes yesterday. So now she will start to pack stuff up and get it moved. There is no way in hell she will fit even a fraction of her clothes in that little 8 by 10. But she fired me from giving a shit about her problems, so I wished her good luck. A little prelude to what finally tipped the scales to get me to do the right thing here. Last night she was still here, and we had been eating some food and half watching an episode of The Bear, and she suddenly hops up and announces that she was going to take our 2 dogs to go meet her mom's new husband, since that's where she is staying until she can find a place. It's been over 3 months and she still hasn't found a place to live. It turned out that she did have a place lined up to rent from her former boss, who was fired from his county supervisor job 10 years ago for having an affair with a secretary at the time. When it happened that 2 days later my then wife also lost her job, the whole town assumed she and him were the ones having the affair, and it stayed that way for a good while, until it was revealed that it was actually a different secretary from another building that the scumbag is boinking in her car at lunchtime. But perception is reality in a small town, and the optics of this thing were not good. So by that time everyone was talking about it. I defended her to whoever asked me about it. At the time my wife was hysterical and insisting that it wasn't her that he was cheating with. I finally believed her, and I still kind of think maybe they didn't actually do that. But I do know that she was there alone with him in a fairly large administrative county building, and I had mentioned that she was getting way too dressed up for the job. She of course got angry and we fought hard about it back then. I will never forget that. After the guy was canned, he would continually text my wife and ask if she would meet him for lunch, and a bunch of other creepy shit, telling her how much he missed her and needed her to help him figure things out. Finally she and I agreed that she would stop communicating with him, and she did. So now fast forward to now. About a month ago she called him looking for work helping with his taxes. She had done that for him before, and of course he jumped at the chance to have her around. So she went down there a few times to help with that. Apparently during the course of that, she must have started confiding in him about our situation, and she was clearly talking a ton of shit to him about me, etc. So it turned out that he was getting ready to buy an old rental building, and he was going to put her into one of the apartments. Well, this guy's wife stayed with him through the whole nightmare 10 years ago, but never really trusted him after that. She and I happened to have been friends for a long time. So I had called her just to talk and kind of compare notes, because I still suspected some fuckery there. But the main thing we talked about was the fact that she would never have allowed him to rent to her, because she holds a public office, and she didn't need the rumor mill to start back up about the 2 of them. So she shut that shit down immediately. Of course, when my wife found out, she blamed me and accused me of sabotaging her. Couldn't be further from true, but okay. If she needs me to play the villain, fine. So that led to her finally agreeing to move in with her mom, who lives only like 10 minutes away and has room. Which was what should have happened way back when this crap started. Now about last night's debacle, which led to me calling the other spouse. It turned out that she didn't actually take the dogs to her mom's. When she had left, my 21-year-old son asked where the dogs were and I explained it to him. He was angry because they are actually more his dogs than anyone's. He isn't going anywhere and there was no way those dogs weren't staying here. So when she got back, he asked her why she did that, and she confessed that she didn't take them to her mom's, but to a friend's house who was going to foster the dogs. This wasn't making any sense. But then I remembered that she had mentioned something about her affair scumbag having dogs and a huge property. So I just asked her point blank, "Did you take the dogs to his house?" Her answer told me all I needed to know. So then I asked her if the guy's wife was there, and she got even more upset. So what I had guessed was actually exactly what had happened. She went over there on the cockamamie premise they had hatched about him taking the dogs for a while, and the guy's wife was right there and agreed to it. so carrying around a cheater's secret gets heavy after a while. I finally gave in to my guilt and called her. The idea that my delusional wife took the dogs there and she and her scumbag cheater partner bullshitted this poor woman into thinking her was just doing her a favor, because I am a monster, and apparently demanded that the dogs couldn't stay here. After spending hundreds of dollars in the last month to buy and install an electric dog fence all by myself to keep them safe, it was ridiculous to really think I didn't want to have the dogs stay here. So I called and asked the guy's wife if she had come by with the 2 dogs last night, and she confirmed. Then she realized what kind of slapdick bullshit they were concocting and she was livid. So that's when the proverbial shit hit the fan and she called my wife screaming. When she got home she was absolutely insane with anger at me. I tried to explain that I had to tell her about it, but of course that fell on dead ears. So this hastened the process of her starting to move some crap out and basically started ripping me apart with her words. The guy's wife also confided in me that he had told her that she has been constantly making up nasty things and convincing everyone there that I was a terrible person. So I have finally come to a place of acceptance, and I am genuinely looking forward to getting some space from her and ultimately not having to look at her every day. She was pulling out all the heartstrings stops, telling me I ruined any chance for us to be friends and that she was never going to talk to me again. I have a feeling that version of never won't be as long as normal, because I'm pretty sure she will need something soon enough. Even if I'm wrong, that's also okay. I am finally ready to move on. Thanks again for everyone who took the time to respond last time. A lot of that great advice really helped me, and I met a couple of really great people through the chat as a result of it. So I think this is hopefully it for this whole shit show. I will update if anything else occurs.